Welcome back on this Friday. We wrap up this week. We have one more week to go in the book of Galatians, and then we're going to start with 1 Corinthians, a little bit longer epistle, and we will be going through that when we are done. But first, let's continue with Galatians chapter 4. Galatians 4 verses 8 through 11. In many ways could have been included with yesterday's reading, and looking back at it, I probably should have included them there, but they really all work together. This whole chapter, actually the chapters 2 and 3 and 4 and even into 5, all work together to help us see the outline of the Apostle Paul's logic as he's explaining why we are saved, why we are found right with God by faith and not by works, not by following the law, not by being circumcised or anything else. Let's pick up with verse 8. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were enslaved to those that by nature are not God's. But now you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. How can you turn back again to the weak and the worthless elementary principles of the world, whose slaves you want to be once more? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid that I may have labored over you in vain. Good stuff in here, as there is always. As I mentioned, it's a continuation of yesterday reading. We talked a little bit yesterday about those elementary principles of the world, being enslaved to those that are by nature not God's. Again, saying, connecting the Greek gods that were not gods to the worship, in a way, of the being legalist, following the law of the Jews now that Christ has come. Neither of them amounted to the promise that God gives. Neither of them are the true worship. Instead, it is of what Christ has done. And by going back to following the law, they are really reverting back to that sinful nature, those worthless elementary principles of the world. I do like how he said, but now you have come to know God, or rather to be known by God. Being known by God, or knowing God, is that relationship aspect. And here Paul says rather how you where is it here? Rather, to be known by God. God is the one initiating that relationship. It is a relational word, this idea of knowing, not as we often make it intellectual, but relational. And God initiates that relationship. Enslaving self to the law is what he's trying to avoid them doing. They are no longer enslaved by their false gods, but now they're enslaving themselves again to the law. The calendar he's talking about here, the days and months, seasons and years, are not from the pagan calendar, rather from the Jewish calendar. Fulfilling the feast, all of those things that Christ fulfilled for us by keeping the law, by following the feast perfectly in our place. Let's continue now with verse 12. Brothers, I entreat you, become as I am, for I also have become as you are. You did me no wrong. You know it was because of a bodily ailment that I preached the gospel to you at first. And though my condition was a trial to you, you did not scorn or despise me, but received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus. What then has become of your blessedness? For I testify you to that, if possible, you would have gouged out your eyes and given them to me. Have I then become your enemy by telling you the truth? They make much of you, but for no good purpose. They want to shut you out so that you may make much of them. It is always good to be made much of for a good purpose, and not only when I am present with you, my little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I could be present with you now and change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. He then goes into a personal recollection of when he ministered to the Galatians. This bodily ailment or weakness of flesh, we don't know what it is. Reading in the commentary, some have speculated that it was something maybe to do with malaria or having to do with his eyes or some other thing. The point is, he doesn't say we don't know. Maybe it's related to the thorn in the flesh that he talks about in 2 Corinthians, I believe it's chapter 12. The point he's making here is not the ailment, but how often those with ailments are mistreated, are spat upon by others. They received him. And they were willing to give their own eye for him, which that's what makes people think that maybe it was something that he was temporarily blinded or whatever. Now we might say, I'd give my left kidney for that person. I care for them so much. That's the idea, that expression that they're giving, their care for Paul and his love and his concern for them, his desire to be there in person. So he might be able to straighten them out, to share with them, to remind them of the hope that is in Jesus and not in the works of the law. One day, he would return to them on his second journey. But until then, this letter will have to do as he works to convince them not to rely on the circumcision or any part of obedience to the law, but to rely on Jesus Christ for that forgiveness and for that grace. We'll see you again on Monday as we begin our last week, wrapping up this great book of Galatians. I'll talk to you then.